Welcome back to Half the Battle. I'm your host, as always, Daniel Levy, your co-host, Shaq. We're going to be talking UFC Vegas, Blaydes versus Alexander Volkov. And Shaq, it's going down this Saturday in the heavyweight main event. Blaydes and Volkov looking to get one step closer to that elusive UFC title shot.
Yeah, Blaydes' only two losses are to Francis Ngannou, and pretty much everyone besides that, he's absolutely dominated. So Blaydes, he's looking to get that title shot. He's right up there in the mix behind Francis. And Volkov, man, this guy at one point, if he would have beat Derek Lewis, I think, possibly he would have got a title shot. But we know that he pulled that epic stun and got knocked out. But, he rebounded with that nice win, dominant win over Greg Hardy, who's doing his thing now. So I think this is a great fight, and I'm interested to see what happens.
And in the co-main event, we got a very exciting featherweight matchup between Shane Burgos and Josh Emmett. And Shaq, it's interesting because Josh Emmett has an 100% knockdown rate at 145 pounds. That means he's dropped every single person he's fought, win or lose, at 145. And Shane Burgos, one of the most exciting contenders in the featherweight division. He's looking to really break into that top 10. And a win over Emmett's going to do exactly that, Shaq.
Yeah, Josh Emmett, man. I've been saying that this guy might be the hardest hitter at 145 for a little while now. And Burgos, man, this guy is big as hell. He's like one of the biggest 45ers I've ever seen. He's long. He can box. He likes to fight with his hands down, which makes this fight very, very compelling because, Shane is going to tempt Emmett to swing that big bomb. So I'm super excited with that one. And the winner of this fight, man, is going to be a solidified top 10 guy.
No doubt about it. Well, before we get down to business, got to let them know to go to bestfightpicks.com. Use that promo code Shaq50 for 50% off Shaq's plays. Use my promo code Dan25 for 25% off mine, or use our combined code 2020 for 20% off the VIPs at bestfightpicks.com. Well, Shaq, let's get right down to business, because first up, in the 55 division, we got a matchup between Austin Hubbard, he's 11-4, and Max Roshkopf is 5-0. Currently, they got Max Roshkopf minus 185. The comeback on Austin Hubbard is plus 160. Well, Shaq, look, this is the credit I'm going to give it to Austin Hubbard. He's durable, he's got UFC experience, and he's got great cardio. Those are the three things I can say about him. Look, he trains in Colorado in elevation. The guy can go 3 hard rounds. Now, one thing about Roshkopf is a lot of people look at him as a jiu-jitsu guy because in his MMA career, he has been very slick going out there, choking his opponents out. But he's actually a former D1 wrestler from NC State. So he's got the high-level wrestling mixed in with his passion for jiu-jitsu. He's a guy, not often you see guys, they finish the college wrestling scene and then they truly fall in love with jiu-jitsu. That's what this guy has done. He's blending both arts very well. Now, we don't really have any proof of what he looks like in the third round, but I'll tell you what we do have proof of, Shaq. We got proof that Austin Hubbard can't finish a completely gassed opponent in round 3, as we saw in his last fight versus Madsen. So I do favor the newcomer Roshkopf here. And, it's funny. I like Hubbard, but it's like we like to call him a harmless Hubbard, because even if his opponent is completely gassed and closing his eyes and ducking down and doing all these things, he still can't get them out of there. And Davi Ramos felt so unthreatened by this guy that he literally tried to stand and bang with him and knock him out, So this is a different matchup because I hear people saying, well, if Davi couldn't submit him, that means Roshkopf can't submit him. And I view it a little bit differently because Davi wasn't aggressively pursuing the subs. He wanted to test his stand-up against Austin Hubbard, and I think that Roshkopf will try to sub him. I think the sub is a big possibility, but if not, he can always resort back to his D1 wrestling, mix in takedowns, which you've seen Hubbard taking down over and over, and grind this one out. So yeah, I'm gonna actually go with the newcomer despite the lack of experience. I think he's talented, and I think this is a fight he can win, Shaq.
Yeah, Austin Hubbard, there's really nothing impressive about him. Just, like you said, he's experienced, at least in comparison to this guy. But this is like one of those typical spots, where you got a newcomer who really hasn't fought anybody, really hasn't proven much. And you got the average, kind of like last week with Nam and that Russian guy, where it's tough to say. I mean, he seems like he knows what he's doing in there, but he just hasn't fought anybody. But this would be somewhat of a doable step up. Hubbard, like you said, he's a little harmless. He's not going to knock anything out. Even his win against Kyle Prepperlek, that first round he was getting touched up, and then Kyle Prepperlek just completely gassed. I mean, these guys are, borderline not UFC level. So, you know, uh, from a betting perspective, I think it's dog or pass just because, I mean, who knows about this Rosh? How do you pronounce his last name?
Yeah, Roshkopf.
Roshkov. Who knows about him? What happens when he gets in the late rounds? He hasn't been tested in any spots, and experience goes a long way in this game. So, from a betting perspective, I'd say it's Hubbard or pass. But just from Hubbard in general, like the guy really. He doesn't really. I don't want to say he doesn't bring anything to the table. He's a good point fighter. For the lower levels. But man, he's just very, like you said, harmless, man. So, I definitely get that Roshkopf pick, but I'll just go Hubbard to be on the opposite. And I think from a betting perspective, one could say there's value on him.
Now, next up in the flyweight division, we got a matchup between Roxanne Modeffari. She's 24-16, and Lauren Murphy is 12-4. Currently, they got Roxanne Modeffari -125. The comeback on Lauren Murphy is +105. Well, Shaq, look, both these ladies have come a long way. We can't deny them anymore. They're both coming off the biggest wins of their respective careers. And at one point, we were thinking, hey, one more fight, these ladies are going to be gone. Well, here they are, man, in the top 10 of the flyweight division, and this is a big fight. So which way you leaning?
Yeah, this is a close fight as well. Modeffari, she pulled off that nice upset over Macy Barber, another upset over Antonina Shevchenko, and Murphy's been pulling off a couple of upsets herself. Like you said, both thought these girls were dead in the water. Man, it's actually surprising because I actually think for once, Roxanne might actually have a speed advantage. I think Lauren Murphy's, a little stiff, very slow, but Murphy, man, she just seems like she's been getting a lot more comfortable in there. She's been fighting with a different aggression. She is a gritty, tough, hard-nosed fighter, as well as Roxanne. Roxanne just really likes to recklessly move forward, press with the takedowns. I do think there's a chance that Macy Barber was very overrated, a very young girl. And, I don't think Lauren Murphy necessarily has the that hole in her wrestling like Macy Barber did. I think it's going to be a tough fight, a close fight either way you look at it. I don't see how you could be confident in either side. It's I don't want to say dog or pass, but I'll take Lauren Murphy in a close decision.
Yeah, look, Lauren Murphy has truly, truly impressed me, man. I mean, from someone who was kind of like a laughingstock, similar to Roxanne Modeffari, to now she's a contender, man. She's got a UFC knockout under her belt, and she even went out there in that last fight as a massive underdog against Andrea Lee. And I don't care who you score that fight for. It's just the performance that I look at. And
real quick, for like that was like kind of like Hill and Gadelia. That was the one decision where I didn't think it was like too bad. Like, I mean, I know, but from what I remember, Lee was spitting out her mouthpiece every 10 seconds, and she was wincing in there. I thought it was a tough fight, a good close fight.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And Lauren Murphy would end every round with takedowns, and that was the best Lauren Murphy has ever looked, regardless of who you score it for. And whoever came up with those strike numbers saying that Andrea Lee outstruck her by like over 30 or 40 strikes, that's complete bullshit. Like, I saw Andrea Lee get her mouthpiece knocked out. I saw her get taken down at the end of rounds. I saw her making faces. That's the best Lauren Murphy has ever looked. Let's give her some credit. And with Roxanne Modeffari, to this day in 2020, she still has the biggest upset of the year, against Macy Barber. So you got to give her a lot of credit. It's just, I still kind of think that Roxanne Modeffari is one-dimensional. And if she can't get it into that realm, she's most likely going to lose. So I kind of disagree with her being a favorite. I think that it actually should be closer to a pick'em, maybe even a slight lean on Lauren Murphy. So my pick will be Lauren Murphy in this spot as well. Also in the flyweight division, we got a matchup between Courtney Casey, she's 9-7, and Gillian Robertson is 7-4. Currently, they got Gillian Robertson -120. The comeback on Courtney Casey is +100. Well, Shaq, one thing we know for sure, Death, Taxus, and Courtney Casey will be taken down in a fight. But that being said, Gillian Robertson is one of these young ladies that, like Eddie Alvarez told us a very long time ago, if she can't get her early sub, she does tend to mentally check out a little bit, and Courtney Casey while we never accused her of being the brightest, she's definitely tough as nails. So which way you leaning in this one?
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because, my boy Eddie was very, he definitely believed that. I actually remember Lauren Murphy and some other girls saying, she is not a quitter. And Eddie was like, yes, she is. and, but, I think this is, this is one of these fights where, look, if you're like Gillian, like you said, if she can't get that sub, she usually, she got knocked out her last fight against Macy Barber, seemed to check out really quick, or, the Mayra Bueno Silva fight. No, those girls are definitely very talented. It's just that I agree with that. I think that, her two wins, when you look at it, are Macedo, who's, complete, trash, let's just be honest here. And then Sarah Froda, who I think tested positive for like everything in the book, and just isn't very good herself, man. So I agree with that statement, man. I really do. I think that if Gillian, I have a hard time believing that she can chain takedowns for 3 rounds and keep it together while eating punches on the feet, if they're going back and forth. I think that at some point she could possibly run into a wall and check out again. Now, Casey, the thing with betting Casey is you have to accept the fact that you're going to get taken down right away. I mean, it's one of those things. But I think Casey's got a good guard to, attack with arm bars, a triangle here and there. Like, she doesn't really get her back taken, or Claudia Gadelia couldn't submit her. I mean, she's been on the ground she submitted Randa Marco. So, I know Gillian's a very talented jiu-jitsu player, but, yeah, I could see her having success, but man, if this gets stretched out into the second and third rounds and they start having stand-up exchanges, I really think Casey could land a shot to maybe even get her out of there, or make Gillian start flopping. Or I actually got Casey in this fight, man. I actually think that she should be the slight favorite, but you're gonna have to deal with some takedowns. But I think it's going to be somewhat of a comeback victory for Cortney Casey on Saturday.
Yeah, look, Casey's been taken down 20 times in UFC competition, and I fully expect Gillian to add to that total. The only thing is that Gillian ain't exactly known for going out there and controlling people and winning decisions, which is the way to beat Cortney Casey. Now, I'm not saying that can't happen here, but based off her history, she's so hell-bent on getting these early subs that if that doesn't happen, she does seem to check out a little bit. And on the feet, I'm not going to call it a mismatch because Casey ain't exactly known for knocking people out, but I will say this. She will pepper her up. She will outland her for sure, and she might break her. It's just that Gillian's going to be able to bail herself out with those takedowns. It's just what happens after that. We have seen Gillian subbed, Mayra Bueno Silva subbed her from bottom before with an armbar, which we've seen Casey pull off twice inside the octagon in her last fight versus Barriault, earlier against Randa Marcos. So that could happen. But we've also seen fights where Casey gets taken down multiple times, like the Jessica Aguilar fight, and she still goes out there and gets a 30-27 on every single card. So she does have a path to victory, even if this hits the scorecards. And I'm going to lean Casey as well. It's just that if you bet her, just know that she's going to be taken down here. So if you can live with that and get past that, I think she's got a good chance to win this fight. Now, next up in the middleweight division, we got a matchup between Marc-Andre Barriault, he's 11-4, and Oskar Piechota is 11-3. Currently, they got Oskar Piechota minus 120. The comeback on Marc-Andre Barriault is plus 100. Shaq, I'm going to take this one first. Look, so obviously both these guys, we weren't expecting them to get another fight in the UFC, and that's no disrespect, just based on how the business goes. 3 straight L's, and especially Piechota getting ran through in those L's in a way where the Mershart one and the Puna Haley one, we were like, dude, maybe you should take some time off and reconsider things because those were hellacious. The Rodolfo Vieira one, we can. No big deal, man. You got tapped out by one of the best black belts in the world. It is what it is. But the Mershart and the Puna Haley ones were very alarming. Now, speaking of alarming, but in a different kind of way, is all 3 of Barriault's fights. It's like, look, he's not been taking massive damage. He's not getting ran through. It's just there's certain things in the athleticism department, the speed department, and the urgency that you want to see from Barriault. If he could just push on that gas a little bit more, I feel like he could maybe win some of these fights. Like, for example, the Andrew Sanchez fight, he had some good moments in that second round. In the Kristoff fight, while I personally think he lost, one judge scored it for him. And then the Park fight, I know just based off the fact that, look, you have those 2 fights and then you go out there and pull a stunt like that you can look at it that way. I'm also like, he took the trip all the way over to Asia, so that didn't really help him. And this fight here is in Vegas, so it's a different scenario. But based off the stylistic matchup, it just seems to me like Oskar is a bit of a front runner, man. If he can't get that first round sub similar to Gillian Robertson, he kind of panics a little bit. He doesn't like the firefight. He's the one that's backing up the entire time on the feet. And while Barriault is kind of slow and plodding, he will go forward and he will throw. So I actually lean towards the underdog Barriault here. I think that if he can get past an early, a kind of a sketchy first round, that he can go out there and kind of break a Piechota, maybe even get his first UFC knockout, let alone UFC win. So I'm actually going to side with the former TKO. I think he might have been a champ over there. One of my Canadian friends, correct me if I'm wrong, but regardless, I'm gonna side with Marc-Andre Barriault to get this win here, Shaq.
Yeah, you make some good points. That was kind of how I was feeling. Piechota, I think he's a good black belt, man. But I think the main thing here is, although I think Marc-Andre Barriault is a low-level fighter that just seems to, at least in these 3 fights, just can't get right. You know what I'm saying? I think that, I don't want to say that he is a little more carefree, but I just think that he's just willing to fight, even if he loses, that's one thing. But I think that he's got a willingness to actually fight. That's where I feel like Piechota, like you said, if he can't get that early finish, that early knockout. And when we look at his wins in the UFC, I mean, he only beat Tim Williams and Johnny Bravo Wilson. I mean, Barriault, he's already been in there with Andrew Sanchez, who's a tough winner, Christoph Jocko, who's in the top 15, and the Park guy. I mean, Park's not bad. He's got a fight with Trevin coming up, so we'll see how that goes. But I think Barriault, could definitely get this win, out tough him. I think he's gonna have a little bit of a sketchy first round, but kind of like the Meerschaert fight, I think if he just stays in there and gets to that second and third round, that eventually Oskar can pull a stunt. I think his confidence is completely zapped. I think that after the Puna Haley fight, I mean, that was a vicious KO, not to mention the Meerschaert fight, which was, let's be honest here, that was a late stoppage. I mean, I remember I was honestly screaming at the TV for the ref to get in there, bro, and save the kid. I know you remember when Oscar's corner man had his head down in the corner. He was just like, oh, God. It was like one of those things where you could tell that they've seen that happen before, so... I'm gonna go with Barriault as well by third round TKO. I think that he's a tough Canadian, even though I think he's slow and not that good. I think he's tough, so I'll take Barriault.
Yeah, Oskar Piechota's corner was like, he's doing it again, you guys. Like it's like they've seen that in sparring before or something. Next,
it was like when you remember when Megan fought Felicia and James Krause was like Megan, no, like.
Now, next up in the strawweight division, we got a matchup between Tecia, the Tiny Tornado Torres. She's 10-5, and Brianna, the Bull Van Buren, is 9-2. Currently, they got Brianna Van Buren minus 210. The comeback on Tecia Torres is plus 175. Shaq, we got to talk about this fight because, man, this whole narrative here is, Ticia's on a 4-fight losing streak, and people say we shouldn't hold that against her because she only lost to, the names that she lost to. And let me remind you something, Shaq. When Tecia fought Weili Zhang, and Weili Zhang was only 2-0 in the UFC at the time, and people were saying, well, Weili Zhang only beat Jessica Aguilar and Danielle Taylor. This is Tecia Torres. And then they were saying stuff like, well, Tecia only lost to Jessica and Joanna. Then it was time to fight Marina Rodriguez, and they said, well, she only lost to Jessica, Joanna, and Marina. Now she's fighting Brianna Van Buren, and they're saying, well, she only lost to Jessica, Joanna, Weili, and Marina. And then after Brianna beats her, they're going to name those 5 names, when she fights the next up-and-coming prospect. But look, as far as this matchup is concerned, Tecia Torres has very, very fast hands, and she's very experienced. She's been doing this for a long time. Back in the day, has a win over Rose Namajunas, beat Paige Van Zandt, beat Angela Hill, beat a bunch of people back in the day, 2016 and before. Even beat Michelle the Karate Hottie Watterson. But when you look at the holes in Tecia Torres' game and you want to exploit it, her 2 biggest weaknesses are pressure and wrestling. And those just happen to be the 2 best assets that Brianna Van Buren brings to the table. Her relentless pressure is unlike anything I've seen before in that division. I know she's gotten this comparison a lot, but it really does remind me of a chick DC. And her wrestling is second to none. I think she might, I know she's kind of small, but I think she might give Tatiana a run for her money just in the wrestling department. But I digress because this is a different matchup. So going into that Lavinia Souza fight, I was doing the whole thing where it was like, you know, if you haven't figured out how to beat Kylan Curran, because she was super impressive, but I was like, dude, everyone's beating Kylan Curran. Let's relax. And turns out we shouldn't have relaxed, because it's not just the fact that she beat Kylan Curran. It's the fact that she beat 3 chicks in one night, all UFC vets, you know what I mean? Juliana Lima handled it like it was nothing. Kylan Curran, and most of these girls, like our girl Yan Zonan even lost her round to Kylan Curran. Meanwhile, Brianna's out here putting on a clinic and finishing her. But then it came time to the UFC debut, and Brianna pushed the pace start to finish on the feet, mixed in the takedowns, and man, I am very impressed with this girl. I truly believe that she's a future top 10 girl. And, you know, I don't get too high on these prospects. You know, the ones that I've been high on, you guys know exactly who they are. Wiley Zhang ended up being a champion. Yan Zonan, she's in the top 10. Marina Rodriguez, she's in the top 10. Those have pretty much been my prospects. And Ribas, who will be in the top 10 soon. This is my new prospect, Brianna Van Buren, man. I think that she's the real deal, and I'm willing to, you know, I guess put my balls on the line, even though she's a favorite here, and say that, you know, she will be in the top 5. She will contend for a title one day. But first things first, she's got to handle Tecia Torres. We've seen time and time again that Tecia Torres cannot get up from bottom. And I'm even talking about against Michelle Waterson. Like, we bet on Tecia Torres in that fight. And her hands look fantastic in that first round. But, Shaq, what have we always said are Michelle Waterson's 2 best qualities? Her sidekick and her head and arm throw. I'm pretty sure a sidekick and a head and arm throw have nothing to do with throwing hands. No one ever said Michelle Waterson had the best boxing. That's why on the feet, she got outstruck every single time. But when she finally got her head and arm throw going, she held Tecia Torres down. Now, someone that's not going to break in the stand-up exchanges is Brianna Van Buren. She's going to be pushing forward the entire time, regardless of if she gets hit with shots. And if it happens to be close, she will mix in takedowns, and Tecia Torres ain't getting back up, guys. And as the fight progresses, she's going to start to get a little bit discouraged, and she's not going to have Rocky in her corner this time, because Rocky's going to be fighting later on in the card. I like Brianna Van Buren here. I think that she does make a statement and defeats Tecia Torres, Shaq.
Yeah, you know, I see a lot of that this week. You know, Van Buren's overrated, and you know, you're gonna get that a lot of times when, you know, I was thinking that going into the Souza fight, but yeah, you know, she kind of sold me, man. You know, like you said, Kylan Curran and all these soccer moms down there in Invicta, you know, really weren't all that impressive. But then you get to Souza, who was a former Invicta champion, somewhat respectable fighter, and she absolutely dominated her. And it was more so, you know, how calculated she was. She was very smart in how she was entering the clinch. I mean, she was tying her up, then she'd box her up, throw the mix and the high kick, just showing a very well-rounded skill set, you know. So I think what this stems from is Tecia Torres is completely done, man. She's her confidence is completely zapped. You know, when, you know, she had that fight with Andrade, which, you know, if I'm not mistaken, she might have won a round in, and, you know, that trickled into the Joanna fight, and it's not, you know, who she's losing to, you know, yeah, blase, but it's the way she's losing. You know, it's, you know, the Joanna fight, did she even really try? She went out there and tried to shoot a takedown and hold on to her legs for 15 minutes just so she didn't get embarrassed. And then you go into the Wiley Zhang fight, and, you know, yeah, Zhang, that might have been one of Zhang's weaker performance, but I honestly think that Zhang felt kind of unthreatened by her and was just out there trying all type of different, you know, spinning attacks and, you know, different crazy things, because she just, when it got time to really fight, Wiley Zhang knew she could always outmatch Tecia Torres. So, and then the Marina Rodriguez fight, that was, you know, Marina's only got fights against Jessica Aguilar and Randa Marcos. This is time for Tecia to get back on track, and she got absolutely mollywopped from start to finish. And I know all these girls are good, but I think Van Buren's good. Maybe not on that level just yet, but I think that as far as just winning and losing, that Tecia Torres doesn't have, you know, what it takes in here or up here. So, I think that Brianna Van Buren's going to come out here and get a breeze decision, beat Tecia Torres up, tie her up on the fence, mix in the high kick and do her thing and be the bully Tecia Torres. That confidence is completely gone, guys. I know, Tecia Torres, but like, let's be honest here. Like back in the day, like the games evolved so much. She was in there with that first group of ladies. At least like some of them, evolved and got a little better, like Esparza, for example, or somebody else. But like Tecia Torres, I feel like once she got, I'm not gonna shit on her personally, but I just feel like once she got married to Pennington, I mean the fighting career just went, she left ATT. So I gotta go with Van Buren here. I think that she's hungrier. I think that she's a better fighter. I think she's better mentally, and I think that she's gonna do the thing on here on Saturday night.
So it just got announced as we're recording this podcast that Frank Camacho has a replacement opponent. I sent you his record on Instagram DM if you want to check it real quick. So I'm gonna take this one first. So next up in the welterweight division, we got a matchup between Frank Camacho. He's 22-8. And Justin the Guitar Hero Jaynes is 15-4. So there's no odds yet, but and I haven't watched any tape because this fight literally got announced as we're recording the podcast. But what I can see from Justin the Guitar Hero Jaynes is he's a 5'7" welterweight, which is already alarming. 30 years old. He's got a decent record. Doesn't look like he's been finished, and he's fought some reasonable comp, but yeah, I'm going to have to go with Frank Camacho here, man. He's got so much more experience. He's seasoned. He's been in there with the who's who. The guy hits like an absolute truck. And he's got some sneaky trips in there, too, that he likes to utilize. He took down my boy Drew Dober 3 times in that fight. And, when Camacho's on his game and he's not fighting someone that's more athletically gifted than him, he usually can go out there and win. And, sometimes the cardio's been an issue, but I don't think it'll be an issue in this spot. Hey, this kid actually, Guitar Hero, beat Troy Lamson back when Troy was 6-0. He handed Troy Lamson Troy's first L, beat Eric Lozano, beat Brandon Noble. So he's beat some guys on the regional scene, but it's time to take that first L, my guy. So I'm going to go with Frank Camacho here, Shaq.
Who the fuck is Lozano? But I got Frank Camacho by first round knockout, man.
Now, next up in the lightweight division, we got a matchup between Clay the Carpenter Guida. He's 35-19, and Bobby King Green is 24-10. Currently, they got Bobby Green minus 235. The comeback on Clay Guida is plus 195. I'm curious about your opinion on this, man, because look, I agree in the sense that I favor Bobby Green, but it's like every single Bobby Green fight is super close. I feel like he sometimes doesn't do enough. And when Guida wins fights, he historically outworks people. So if this goes the distance, I'm curious to see what happens. The question is, does Guida have the durability to last the 3-round distance, Shaq?
Yeah, this is a very interesting fight because, I'm going to just go ahead and say it, man. I actually agree with the line being, somewhat wide, and I get it. A lot of people are saying, 2 old guys, Green's like 1-3-1 in his last few fights, not the same guy, all this and that. But, man, Clay Guida, to be honest, ton of respect for him. Beat Pettis, beat RDA. I think that he's a great competitor, one of the better lightweights, of the last decade, man. So shout out to Clay Guida. Would never, say anything disrespectful about the guy, but just from a fighting sense, man, I really think that he's only got a couple fights left. Whereas like Bobby Green, although he's not the same guy he once was, let's just look at the competition level that he's been fighting, man. We're talking about he's fighting Francisco Trinaldo down in Brazil. I know Trinaldo's old, but Trinaldo can still bang with the best of them. Let's just be honest here. Trinaldo beat Alexander Hernandez, man. He's out there fighting these young bucks like Lando Venata. He's still going to draw with them. Drakkar Close, like guys that have better pressure than Clay Guida, bigger, powerful, younger, fresher, and he's still having like somewhat close fights with these guys. I mean, it's not like he's out here getting knocked out in the first round and finished. So, the whole he doesn't do enough thing. I think when he gets a step down in competition where he can actually go out there, style, and have fun, and he's not fighting a a top 20 guy like Francisco Trinaldo or Jakar Close, who's like 6-2 in the UFC. These young up and comers like Lando and Rashid Magomedov and Dustin Poirier. Like, I think that he can actually really have one of and his fight with Eric Koch. I know you remember the real key to this fight. Why I think it's a good matchup for Green is the wrestling. Clay Guida. If he's looking to try to box Bobby, I think Bobby's too fast. He lands more strikes per minute. He's just a lot more flashier. I think he can, have one of those classic King Green performances where he's talking to him in there and, maybe landing a couple slaps. And I think that the wrestling really, man, I think Green is a case to be made that he might have better MMA wrestling than Clay Guida, man. I think his wrestling is very, very underrated. You ever seen Bobby Green get held down or, I think his wrestling is very, very underrated. I mean, he's taken down Jakar Close. He took down Trinaldo a couple times. I think that Bobby Green's going to come out here and have a classic King Green performance. Props to Clay Guida, but man, he throws single shots at a time. He's just swinging the basic, left hook, big overhand right, looking for a double leg, and I just don't see that happening. I think that King Green still comes to fight, even though he's not the same guy, but I think this is a step down in competition for him, like a big step down in competition for him. So I'm going to go with King Green, actually, to get a finish here and get on the mic and talk some shit with DC. So I'm going to go with King Green.
Bobby Green will always have a special place in my heart because I'll never forget the time I cashed that plus 250 on him against Josh Thompson back in the day. One of my favorite underdog cashes to this day, Shaq. And look, I like Bobby Green's style, man. He's super exciting. A lot of people criticize that he talks and fights with his hands down, but look, he's a showman. I love the showmanship, man. He's super entertaining to watch, and he's a very solid fighter. He has been this entire time. A lot of these decision losses have been super close fights to real tough competitors, like you mentioned, Rashid, Drakkar, Francisco. So, these are serious fights. And with Clay Guida, UFC Hall of Famer, love the guy. I mean, I remember in high school watching him fight Nate Diaz, the Diego Sanchez fight, the whole bit. Clay Guida's the fucking man. I even saw him fight Brian Ortega in person, and that fight, like, look, he put up a good fight, a lot better of a fight than I expected him to. So I got to give him credit. I know he's out here kind of, he lost around to BJ Penn in 2018 and this and that. That's not necessarily a good look. And, I wouldn't be surprised to see Bobby Green even come out here and get a submission win along the way. But, yeah, I got Bobby Green here, man. I guess the reason that I was kind of wondering about the line was because Bobby does tend to fight close. And, like I said, if Guida, when Guida wins fights, he historically outworks people. So if Bobby wants to play around and not throw, that's where it kind of gives Guida a chance. But if Bobby fights to his potential, he's winning this fight. So I'm going to go with him as well. Now, also in the lightweight division, we got a matchup between Roosevelt Roberts, he's 10-1, and Jim fucking Miller is 31-14. Currently, they got Roosevelt Roberts minus 240. The comeback on Jim Miller is plus 200. Shaq, look, this kid Roosevelt Roberts, man, he's impressed me. He's been thrown right into the gauntlet in his UFC career, and he's literally having to develop right before our eyes. I feel like he's been making big improvements every single fight, and like you mentioned on the last pod, he had to go to Russia to fight Yakovlev, and even the Vince Pichel fight was back and forth. So those are the kind of experiences you need to come out here and fight. When we talk about being experienced, you talk about the guy with the most fights in UFC history, and that just happens to be Jim Miller. I mean, the guy is unbelievable. Been fighting throughout so many eras of the sport. A guy that I believe should be in the Hall of Fame. I love Jim Miller. It's Jim Miller, you know what I mean? But historically speaking, last few years, the way Jim Miller wins and the way Jim Miller loses. The way Jim Miller wins is a first-round sub or a first-round knockout. I mean, he can come out here, tag you up. He comes to throw. He comes to bang. You shoot on a sloppy takedown on this guy, he can snatch that neck. But historically speaking, if you can get past that first round with Jim Miller, like as of the last few fights, his cardio isn't the same as it once was. I think it might be due to that condition, which just speaks volumes to how tough this guy is to go out there and fight regardless of what's going on. I mean, I love Jim Miller, man. I'd love to drink a beer with that guy someday. But I feel like if Roosevelt Roberts can get past the early going, that he's the one that's going to have success. The length is a massive thing here. I mean, nowadays we're seeing 6 foot tall, lightweights, and I think he might be even taller than 6 feet. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think that somewhere along the way he might actually find the submission himself if he's still in there after the first round. So I'm gonna lean with the favorite as well. I'm gonna go with Roosevelt Roberts, Shaq.
Yeah, I'm super excited for this fight. Jim Miller, a legend, like you said, he should be in the Hall of Fame. And to be honest, his last fight against Hot Sauce there, he didn't look too bad, man. He still had some pop on them shots. He, won a round, I believe. That was a good fight. But both those guys are 36 years old, and Roosevelt Roberts, he definitely hasn't fought anyone of this caliber. He had that setback to Vince Pichel, but man, I really like that Yakovlev performance. I know it was coming down to the wire and this and that, but when you look at a guy like Yakovlev who's been in there with Maya Usman, and for Roosevelt to only be in there with him with 8 fights or so was definitely a big win in my eyes for him, man. And I think he's throwing with a different aggression. I think that he's letting his hands go a little bit more. And when this guy lets his hands go, I know he's known for his submissions, but when he lets his hands go, man, he throws with a ferocity, man, with that length. It's kind of scary. I want to see him let those hands go more. I know a lot of people saying that he does a lot of dumb things in there, and look, you're gonna get some of that, with him being so young in his career. But I think that the fact that he's stepping right back in there after that win over Brock Weaver is a good thing. And Jim, how many more of these last stands does he have where he takes a vicious beating? Like, I mean, towards the end of that Hot Sauce fight, it was getting ugly. You know what I'm saying? And that's not the first beating that Jim Miller's taken. He's taken several. So at some point, you gotta wonder, like, man, how many more of these get my ass whooped and then come back and get a win here and there. But I think his wins, I think they found like the scoundrels of like the bottom dwellers like Alex White and Jason Gonzalez, and the Clay Guida fight in which he got rocked right before that. Clay Guida just is towards the tail end of his career. So I think that Roosevelt Roberts, his range is going to frustrate Miller, and I think his patience is going to frustrate Miller as well. I don't think you're going to see Roosevelt go out there and start trying to look for a knockout or anything like that. I think he's going to stick to the jab, occasionally back himself into the fence, get a couple of clinch exchanges, look for the neck at Jim Miller. And like you said, you've seen Jim Miller tap several times throughout his career. And I think the Pichel fight, where people saying that Vince Pichel, absolutely broke him, this and that, which could, but I actually thought it was a good showing, man. I thought that the kid fought tough. I think Pichel is a sleeper. Pichel's handled a lot of first L's. I know you remember when he knocked out Beat Down Brown down there in Australia in the first round and beat Neto BJJ. I mean, Pichel's a solid guy. So I think that Roosevelt Roberts' best days are ahead of him. It is a big step up in competition, but the fact that the bookies odds makers open this up so wide leads me to believe that, man, this could be an indication of what's to come on Saturday night. They think the Young Bucks about to come out here and probably finish Jim Miller. So I'm gonna lean that side as well. But I don't think it's a dog or pass situation, like a lot of people are saying. I think that Jim Miller is at a big height disadvantage, a cardio disadvantage. I don't see him chaining double legs for 3 rounds, having the cardio for that. So, yeah, I got Roosevelt by finish.
Now, next up in the welterweight division, we got a matchup between Lyman Good, he's 21-5, and Belal Muhammad is 16-3. Currently, they got Belal Muhammad -130. The comeback on Lyman Good is +110. Shaq, this is a fantastic matchup in the welterweight division. Got to give Lyman Good a lot of credit. He looked unbelievable his last fight against Chance Rencounter. Absolutely ran through him in a way. I mean, put on a serious clinic. It was a exhibition out there. His kicks are so damn hard. The guy's super physical. He's built like a fucking brick house. I mean, the guy is he's serious, man. And if you're not going to go out there and fight Lyman, if you're going to let him tee off on you, I mean, he won't just tee off on you. He'll style on you, man. But one thing I got to say about that fight, and I mean, we can mention how, Belal schooled Chance Rencounter a couple years back too. But one thing about that fight, how many takedowns did Chance Rencounter land? 0. How many strikes to the face did Chance Rencounter land? 1 or 2, 0. So it's a situation where if Lyman can go out there, and I don't want to call it front run because it's like he did put on that clinic every single round, and he did handle him accordingly. But when there's no resistance, that's when Lyman does his best. Like in that Andrew Craig fight, in the Ben Saunders fight, when there's nothing coming back at him, he's scary as hell. But when you stand up to a guy like Lyman Good, as you saw in the Zaleski fight, and Zaleski's not as, physically or athletically talented as Lyman Good or anything like that. He might not even have the same technique as Lyman Good. Because let me say this, it's not just that Lyman Good's like some muscle man. The guy's technical striking is very, very serious. His parrying and his hand fighting, I actually really like it. When you just look at the pure technique itself, Lyman Good is really, really good at what he does, no pun intended. But the thing is, when it comes down to getting dirty and actually fighting, that's where people have been able to exploit a weakness in Lyman Good's game. And he doesn't like that back and forth fight, in between rounds in that Zaleski fight, because Zaleski was standing up to him, and Coach Schulman's asking him, Lyman, what's going on? And he's like, I don't want to get knocked out. And it's like, fuck that, Lyman, get knocked out, right? You remember that? And the reason why is because Zaleski wasn't afraid of this guy. Zaleski met him in the middle and fought him. And one thing I'll say about Belal Muhammad is this guy, win, lose, or draw, will come out here and he will fight you. And it's funny because if you look at Belal Muhammad when he first came into the UFC in 2016, and he went 1-2 in his, first 3 fights, a lot of us were saying shit like, maybe Belal should drop to 55 and this and that. Well, in his latest run, now that he's won 6 of his last 7, no one's saying he should drop to 55 because he's put on size. Now he's looking like a big welterweight. I mean, me and you saw him in ATL, and he wasn't looking like no 55er out there. The guy is put on size, and he's developing all areas of his game. And I know he's known as having a bit of a point fighting style on the feet, but he's actually landed 19 takedowns in his UFC career. He's got some of the nicest entries I've seen in the welterweight division. And most importantly, I think he can hang with Lyman Good on the feet. And I think when Belal starts getting off on some of his shots, that can discourage Lyman Good. But most importantly, I think he's going to mix in the entries, take him down, which we've seen in the past has been a weakness in Lyman Good's game. I'm not just talking about the Damian Maia fight, which, one takedown, the fight was over shortly after. But Zaleski took him down with something easy, just caught a kick, put him down right away. Even that fight on the Ultimate Fighter where you remember Dana was like, this is the Bellator champion? You remember that? Like the guy, Ian Stevens, was taking him down at will. Now, granted, he's gotten a lot better since then. He stuffed Chancellor and counters takedowns. I'm just not convinced that he's going to stuff Belal Muhammad's takedowns. Now, I'm not going to use this whole COVID thing against Lyman Good because I don't have any proof that he stopped training or anything like that. I don't know the deal. So I'm assuming we're going to see the best Lyman Good on Saturday night. But I know for a fact we're going to see the best Belal Muhammad on Saturday night as well, because this is a guy that he's trained throughout this entire quarantine. I'm not supposed to talk about this, but you know how they closed a bunch of gyms. Let's just say that didn't prevent Belal Muhammad from getting work in. Not to mention the fact, when you talk about, putting your ego to the side, how about going and training with the last man to beat you? Belal Muhammad flew down to Fortis MMA, and he specifically wanted Jeff Neal to help him out, coach safe, and he had obviously his mentor, Lewis Taylor, there with him. And, I'm kind of close to the situation, so I'm going to give you a personal example. I want to speak to the kind of work ethic Belal Muhammad has. So I was actually playing Call of Duty with him and his mentor, Lewis Taylor, one night at like 1 a.m. And this is after Belal's already had a full day of training. He doesn't have to do any more training at all. He's done for the day. He's relaxing. And at 1 a.m., he says, you know what? I want to go run some miles on the street. And Lewis Taylor, his mentor, literally, this is at fucking 1 a.m. They can go to sleep. Lewis Taylor was like, all right, I'm coming through. So he leaves, goes in his car, goes to Belal Muhammad's house, and they literally go run the streets of Chicago at 1 a.m. for however long. So this is the kind of dedication these guys have. They truly live and breathe the fight game. And I think on Saturday night, it's going to come down to who wants it more. Look, there's always a chance Lyman Good can land that fight-ending shot. We can't deny that. We know Belal's been hit a couple times. But if that fight-ending blow doesn't happen for Lyman Good in the first 7 minutes, I think that Belal Muhammad is going to hang with him on the feet. But more importantly, he's going to mix in the takedowns. And once they reach that breaking point, that's where Belal's going to take over and break him and run away with this thing. So I'm going to go with Belal Muhammad via unanimous decision, Shaq.
Yeah, man, this is a good fight. This is a really good fight. These guys, I know they've been supposed to they've had a couple of matchups fall through in the past. Man, this is a good fight because I see those things you're saying. The takedowns. He has a great you know uh, level change Belal, and he like his parrying game is on point. Like Bilal's definitely good. It's and like you said, Lyman. One thing I will say, man, I kind of feel like in the past I was a little bit too hard for that on him in that Eliza fight. He definitely said what he said in the corner, but man, I actually thought it was a good showing. And I personally, I don't think Belal has that type of firepower. I think that he's more of a MMA well-rounded game. Likes to shoot the doubles, a great level change, jab. Keep it simple on the feet from the outside, and his parrying game is super on point. I think Lyman can play that game too. I think Lyman is a little bit more one dimensional just with his power, but I think that Lyman is kind of I don't say a little underrated because man, if he is on point, if he is sharp, if he is getting more comfortable in there, man, he's got the power to knock a lot of these guys out. And with that being said, I think that although I think Belal has a slightly better like technical prowess and just I think he's a better overall fighter. I think that Good has such a size advantage here and a power edge that it might possibly not matter. So I'm definitely intrigued to see what actually happens. And I do think Good's getting a little bit more comfortable. One thing a lot of people have always criticized him is the throwing. And I know the Ren counter fight was an easy fight, but just from the betting perspective, man, it was a closely lined fight. I mean, it turned out to be a mismatch. But man, I think this is a close fight. Like I see the thing, Belal mixing it up on him, and he has been taken down in the past. But I also feel like there's a chance where Lyman's just simply too strong for him to possibly do that. And I think that if Lyman starts moving forward on him like he does in a lot of his fights, one thing I'll say about the Eliza fight, man, he moved forward the entire time. I definitely would be a little bit worried about some of those exchanges. I think Belal drops his hands down a little bit, but Belal, he fights like a lawyer, man. He's super smart. He understands the game very well. So, if this hits the cards, I am leaning him to win. It's just, man, I really do think there's a chance Good could possibly be getting more comfortable in there. And I think that if Good cracks him, I'm not convinced that he's going to be able to eat it. I know that he's been doing his thing in there, but man, I feel like Good is more talented than those guys if he can put it together. But we'll see. He's failed in the past, but it's a good close fight. I think it's a 50-50 fight, man. So I'll take Belal by a close decision, but I would not be shocked if Good knocked him out. And I think for the bettors that got Good at like plus 130, 140, whatever it was, or I think that's a good bet. But if people start betting Good, I wouldn't be opposed to Belal as well. So
now next up in the bantamweight division, we got a matchup between Raquel Pennington. She's 10-8, and Marion Reneau is 9-5. Currently, they got Raquel Pennington minus 160. The comeback on Marion Reneau is plus 140. Well, Shaq, I was initially leaning Raquel Pennington to kind of edge it, but the line isn't really reflecting a 50-50 fight. It seems like most people are favoring Raquel pretty decently here. I mean, you think that she's going to edge this one, or you pulling from my girl Marion Reneau? I believe she turns 43 on fight night.
yeah, Raquel's kind of lost a step. I know she beat Irene not too long ago, but she's just a tough fighter. A lot of people are shitting on her about the home fight, which kind of wasn't her fault. I kind of predicted that would happen. I said that clinch game at home and is serious, and she held her on that fence the entire time. So I don't kind of hold Rocky. Marion or no, I like Marion. That win over Sarah McMahon was on point. Has a win over Andrade. Definitely got some good wins, but getting 30-26 by Kat Zingano is a little alarming. And the fact that in the Yana Kunitskaya fight, what was kind of sad about that is like, live, it's kind of clear. Like that fight was just, and I don't want to say two old ladies fighting, but it was like, It just wasn't. It wasn't a good look. I mean, look, I thought it was one of those cases where Yana like clearly won, just outlanded her the first two rounds. Reneau was hesitant, and then the third round, you saw how Yana's face ended up looking. Nose broken, face covered in blood, and Reneau's like so shocked that she lost. It was kind of like, Marion, come on now, like you lost the first two rounds. But man, so I think I favor Rocky. I think that I don't want to bring the age into it or anything like that because I don't think it matters that much. But I think in certain matchups, like Rocky will be able to, use her little bully style. But when she's in there with like, Jermaine and, Nunes and Holly Holm, like these fighters that are super educated and have like real skill sets, that's where she's gonna struggle. As where these type of fighters, I kind of think she does well against. She just beat Arena not too long ago, so that's got to go for something. So I got Raquel Pennington here by a tough decision.
It's an interesting matchup for a couple of reasons because if you want to know the blueprint to beat Marion Reneau, it's pretty simple. Take her down and don't get subbed, and you're going to win the fight, right? Like, if you watch the tape on Marion, one thing about her, similar to Courtney Casey, is she can't stuff a takedown for whatever reason. But on the flip side of that, if you box with Marion Reneau, she's got some decent hands. And also, if Marion gets on top, that's where she can do some damage. And the thing with Rocky Pennington is, she's just kind of average. She, sometimes she can use her size, kind of bully these girls a little bit, kind of edge out fights and this and that. But the overall game isn't that great. And she doesn't land too many takedowns either. But then again, one takedown and the round might be over, and that's a sealed off round for Raquel. I just kind of feel like this should be closer to a 50-50 fight. And while I do lean Raquel, I lean her around, a minus 120, a minus 125. So here at minus 160, I'm actually going to go on the opposite end and take Marion Reneau to get it done on her 43rd birthday. Shout out to the Belizean bruiser, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, look, I think if she can make this close, she has a chance to win the split decision. So we'll see what happens, but I'm going to go with Marion Reneau to get this upset. Co-main event of the evening in the featherweight division. We've been waiting for this one. We got Josh Emmett. He's 15-2, and Hurricane Shane Burgos is 13-1. Currently, they got Shane Burgos minus 140. The comeback on Josh Emmett is plus 120. Well, Shaq, you got one of the most talented strikers in the division in Shane Burgos, but he fights with his hands down, taking on the hardest hitter, arguably, in the featherweight division, and Josh Emmett. Is the hands-down thing going to be the downfall of Shane Burgos, or is he going to come out here and pick apart Josh Emmett?
Yeah, this is an interesting fight because, we got Burgos, who's one of the bigger featherweights you're going to see in the division. And then you got Josh Emmett, man, who I've been saying for the long time. I actually predicted that this guy would go out there and knock out the number 3 featherweight in the world at the time in Ricardo Lamas on a couple weeks short notice. And that's exactly what he did. Then he fought Jeremy Stevens, kind of had that letdown. And he bounced back from that vicious KO with another vicious 2 stoppages in a row. But man, Burgos is definitely going to be his toughest test since Jeremy Stevens. Man, Burgos is one of these guys where I know everyone's saying like, oh, you mean to tell me like Emmett's not going to crack him on the chin at some point, which like he probably is. But man, I do like see the angle of, if this hits the cards that Burgos is going to win, just because of the fact that pretty much the only type of strikes that Emmett throws is a big overhand rights, left hooks. I know he knocked Mersada out with a jab, but, just being Burgos being so tall, I don't see that happening in this particular fight. But man, this is a good fight because Shane gets hit like almost 6 times a minute. Even when he fought Cub Swanson, there were still moments in that fight where it's just like some of these shots are just getting too close for comfort. It's like, that he's probably not going to get knocked out, but then like he keeps playing around with that. And you see the Kurt Hollabaugh fight where, he's in there and he gets clipped with a big overhand right, hits the deck, but he was able to pull the armbar off. So Shane, like, I have a hard time believing that his coaching staff, like, finally maybe possibly had a talk and was like, bro, like, like we can't like we got to put our hands up a little bit. Like this, I mean, just turn on Josh Emmett's highlight reel. So I think that if this hits the cards, it's going to favor Burgos. But if this ends early, it's definitely going to favor Emmett. I think that Burgos mixes it up to the body a lot better, just has a much more variety of shots, kicks, jabs, hooks to the body. And I think he's the more well-rounded fighter. It's just that if Emmett cracks you on the chin early, or just even in the third round, I mean, there's a chance he knocks you out. So this is a kind of a pass fight for me because I see both sides. Like when Shane Burgos finally does get knocked out again, I know Calvin knocked him out the first time. And it's so funny because, Calvin was touching him up with a jab early on, but then Shane actually came back in that pace and that size. He was just walking Calvin down, hitting him to the body. So I do favor Burgos slightly just as a pick. It's just from a betting perspective, I just can't. There's been too many close calls with him and his hands down, and you cannot deny that the fact. I mean, look, Emmett's had a round where he dropped Arantes like 5 times or 4 times. He knocked out Ricardo Lamas stiff. I know there's a vicious KO back in the local scene, the Christos Giagos. Like I've seen dudes on ice skates when they fight Josh Emmett, man, dancing around the cage. And the Michael Johnson fight, he's stiff, and the Mirza Bektik fight. So Emmett, I feel like, is kind of a little bit underrated. I feel like, I mean, he kind of doesn't get enough credit just because of that Jeremy Stevens fight. But man, I cannot deny that guy's power. And just betting against him at minus money, I think these are the type of guys that you sometimes have to watch out for. So I'll pick Burgos by decision as a pick, but from a betting perspective, it's pass for me.
Yeah, you said it really well, man. I feel like on DraftKings, you definitely want exposure to both sides because they both got paths to victory. I wouldn't put them on the same lineup, though. I'd put them on separate lineups because if Emmett wins, he's going to knock Burgos the fuck out. But if Burgos wins, I mean, there's the decision possibility, but I wouldn't write off a Burgos knockout either, man. Burgos has so much output. His technique is so much better than Josh Emmett's. He really mixes it up. And he's huge for the weight class, like you mentioned. Also, what about the takedown defense? Because I know people are bringing up the whole takedown angle. Burgos can stuff a takedown and get back up, too. Now, I want to bring this to the table. Like, if we're thinking about Josh Emmett, the best way to knock this guy out is not just go out there, swing home run shots. I think he should feint the takedown. Let him think about the takedown coming. And then when the hands naturally start to drop a little lower, that's when you go upstairs and possibly put this guy away. So, it's just a tough one for me to call because it's like, I think Burgos is the much better fighter, but the one thing that Emmett brings to the table could be the thing that wins him this fight. And it's been the thing that's won him all these fights. You can make the argument MJ and Lamas are better fighters than him, but it didn't even matter, right? So it might not matter here either, but I don't know. This is one I just want to watch as a fan because I need to see what's going to happen. And I'm curious if it's as simple as we're saying, as, either Burgos picks him apart or Burgos gets knocked out. Is it truly that simple? We're going to find out. I'm also leaning with Burgos, but, let's just enjoy this fight as fans. We're not obligated to put money on every single fight, and this is one that could literally go either way. It's a hell of a fight. I'm going to lean with Shane Burgos here. Main event of the evening in the heavyweight division. We got a matchup between Curtis Razor Blaydes, he's 13-2, and Alexander Volkov is 31-7. Currently, they got Curtis Blaydes minus 400. The comeback on Alexander Volkov is plus 325. Well, Shaq, let me tell you this. Alexander Volkov's come a long way. I know you remember back in the day when he was the Bellator heavyweight champion, and if you wanted to take down Alexander Volkov in Bellator, you're going to take him down. And not only that, he's probably not getting back up, but nowadays in the UFC, I feel like he's made massive improvements, man. I know he had the slip up against Derek Lewis, but I feel like overall his takedown defense has gotten much better, and he's starting to feel comfortable in there. He knocked out the former champion Fabricio Werdum. He can knock out legends like that. He can also knock out up-and-comers beat up-and-comers rather, like Greg Hardy when he picked him apart. And look, Volkov's been doing his thing, but so has Blaydes. And one thing about Blaydes is he sets takedown records in there, and one of the hardest takedowns to stop in the entire heavyweight division. And if your name's not Francis Ngannou, chances are you're probably not going to beat the guy. Now, there's a couple ways to look at it because Curtis Blaydes, I would recommend, sitting from the couch, I would recommend you go out there and try to take this guy down over and over. But Knowing the fact that Curtis Blaydes just knocked his last opponent out in Junior Cigano, who's always been known for his MMA boxing, sometimes these wrestlers start to fall in love with their hands. And if Curtis Blaydes wants to be cute and wants to come out here and test his stand-up against Volkov, I think that's where Volkov has a path to victory. However, if Curtis Blaydes gets back to the meat and potatoes, grinds this guy out, rinse and repeat with the takedowns, mixing that nasty ground and pound, then Curtis Blaydes is going to win this fight, and the minus 400 is going to look appropriate. It's just about Curtis Blaydes' approach to this fight, because again, like I said, these wrestlers get one knockout, all of a sudden they think that they're strikers, and they start to fall in love with that. That's when you start to see them hit the deck. So we'll see what kind of approach he has. That's why I'm saying be cautious with the minus 400, because he might try this new approach. But if he goes out there like he normally does, mixes in takedowns, he should come out here kind of dominantly. So I'm going to go with the favorite Curtis Blaydes, Shaq.
Yeah, this is a great main event. I'm a big fan of both guys. Been a fan of Volkov since he was in Bellator, losing Congo and Tony Johnson back in the day, beating Ivanov and Blaydes, like you said, other than Francis Ngannou. I mean, he's just been dominant. He does his thing. He gets the takedowns. I think that, to be honest, that I don't want to say he necessarily doesn't have to take him down, because that threat, that level change, that, man, these guys bite on it so much with him that, like, he kind of comes over. He's starting to come over the top with the right hand a lot of the times now, and faking these guys out. And he's a super powerful guy. And Volkov, man, he's more of a slower paced heavyweight. Likes to stick the jab out there. He likes to throw his straight shots. Kind of likes to extend the fight. So Curtis has got to make sure he doesn't blow himself out, smashing this guy on the ground, and then possibly start getting jabbed up and inside low kick. Because Volkov, man, although he's not necessarily known for the one punch KOs, he'll start torturing guys out there and start dragging it on and making dudes look silly. And man, Volkov is underrated as well, in my opinion. I mean, this guy is 6-1 in the UFC. He kind of was on quite a nice little dominant streak himself, if it wasn't for that Derek Lewis fight. But, you got to go with Blaydes here. The wrestling is just too much for these guys. But from a betting perspective, I don't want to say it's Volkov or a pass, but I think that there is some slight value there, man. I think that, Volkov, I know they got a game plan for this wrestling. At least, like, maybe he tries the GDR game plan and backs himself into the fence, something like that. He's been working with Kenny Johnson from Black House, so we'll see what his answer is for the takedowns. He's had a bad history in the past with the clinch in the wrestling game, but like you said, he's been making improvements, so we'll see. But I favorite Kurt, man. He's just too powerful. He just gets these takedown records and finishes these guys. I know you remember what he did to Shamil down there in Abu Dhabi when 2 Chainz was front row saying, "Beat him, Kurt, beat him, Kurt." You know what I'm saying? So, like, I got Curtis Blaydes here, probably by finish.
Well, Shaq, now we got to talk about the fight to watch and the fighter to watch. So what is the fight to watch for UFC Vegas 3?
My fight to watch is going to be Roosevelt Roberts versus Jim Miller. This is that typical prospect versus, all-time vet test here for Roosevelt. If he gets this win, man, he's going to be somewhat of a household name now. And Jim Miller's one of the best guys to ever do it, one of the best guys to ever compete in the lightweight division. And if he gets a win, when Jim Miller wins, everyone's happy, man. So, that's my fight to watch. I want to see if Roosevelt Roberts is ready for this big step up.
For me, my fight to watch is Lyman Good versus Belal Muhammad. I feel like this is going to be a very action-packed fight while it lasts. Obviously, Lyman Good hits like an absolute truck. Belal Muhammad's got the smarts and the fight IQ and the wrestling. And I'm just very curious to see what exactly takes place when these two lock horns. This is a fight that's been supposed to happen since 2016, so both guys are super familiar with each other. They've been training to fight against each other for years. Now they finally get to meet on Saturday night. For that reason, Good versus Muhammad is my fight to watch. Well, Shaq, who is your fighter to watch for UFC on ESPN 11?
My fighter to watch is going to be Bobby King Green, man. I feel like Bobby Green's got a good fight on his hands, and he's one of the most entertaining guys, to be in the UFC. I mean, this guy, he's talking in there. He's got a good story, and with everything going on in the world, I think he's gonna have a good weekend and get on that mic and do his thing. So Bobby Green's my fighter to watch.
And for me, my fighter to watch is Brianna Van Buren. Like I told you guys already, I'm very selective about my prospects in that division, but every single one that I've been high on has either been a champion like Wiley Zhang or been in the top 10 like Yan Zonen and Marina Rodriguez and soon Amanda Ribas. And I'm adding Brianna Van Buren to that list. I think she's the real deal, and this is a chance for her to go out there and show how legit she is against a perennial top 10 fighter in Tecia Torres, someone who was in the Royce Gracie era of that division, someone who's paid her dues, you know what I mean? So this is a big opportunity, and for that reason, Brianna Van Buren is my fighter to watch, Shaq. Well, Shaq, we did it. It's going down this Saturday in Las Vegas, Nevada. Curtis Blaydes versus Alexander Volkov. They can get our bets at bestfightpicks.com. Use Shaq's promo code Shaq50 for 50% off his plays. Use my promo code Dan25 for 25% off mine. Use our promo code 2020 for 20% off the VIPs at bestfightpicks.com. Follow Shaq at MMA Genius 05 on Twitter, at ShaqBFP on Instagram. Follow me at Best Fight Picks on Twitter, at Best Fight Picks Official on Instagram. You can follow the pod on Instagram too at Half the Battle Pod or Half the Battle HQ on Twitter. Truly appreciate it, guys. Subscribe to Half the Battle on iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube, Stitcher, Spotify, all the places where we are available. Thank you guys so much for your support. We'll be back next week for another fight night. So until the next time, let's cash these bets.